much nicer.
Gender balance.
So welcome everybody to one more of our interviews series on leaders beyond the state. Today we have with us, and I want to thank him very much for having accepted to come and back to Florence and the UI. We have with us President Josep Borrell. There's a current series on Netflix, I don't know if you've seen it, that is called by David Letterman, a famous host, American host. And the title of the series is My Next Guest Needs No Introduction. And I think that could be the alternative title for the series that we have. And it's certainly the case with our guest today. Josep Borrell is a very well-known and famous politician in Spain and in Europe. He's been minister in the Spanish government. He's been member of the European Parliament and then president of the European Parliament. Above all, he's been president of the European University Institute. More recently, he has gone back to his origins as an academic, gone back to be a university professor until very recently. But he remains very engaged in the public debate, both in Europe and particularly recently in Spain, being one of the most simultaneously reasonable and vocal voices on the debate on Catalonia. And who knows what waits you next in light of what's taking place in Spain. We'll see. But thank you very much for coming. We have with us to moderate and conduct the interview Tony Barber, European editor of the Financial Times, and another person that needs no further introduction. And then we have 4 researchers and members and fellows of the different departments at UI. We have Anna KLEIDER, this is a Max Weber Fellow at the Department of Political and Social Sciences. We have ANDI SHEHU, researcher at the Department of History. We have Maria José SCHMIDT-KESSEN, that is researcher at the Department of Law of the UI. And we have Alessandro D'Alfonso, EU Fellow at the Robert Schuman Center for Advanced Studies. Thank you very much for everybody. Thank you in particularly to Josep Borrell again and to Tony Barber. Tony, the floor is yours.
All right. Good afternoon, everybody. The way we're going to do this is I'm going to start with one round of questions to Josep Borrell from each of the 4 fellow panelists. Then we'll have a second round, and hopefully there will be some time then for you in the audience to ask Mr. Borrell any of your own questions. So without any further ado, let me start with ANDI SHEHU. Your first question.
Hello. Thank you to everyone and to the organizers, particularly to Benedita. And so I wanted to open with 2 general questions about your work as president of the EP. The first one is, you presided over the Eastern enlargement, and the national parties presented in the EP almost doubled. And so my question was, how did this change the nature of the discussions, of the issues being discussed within the party? Did this shift political allegiances in any way? And how, maybe even how this is impacting even today? You see a continuance or a completely different pattern?
Well, that's true. I came to the European Parliament just with the first, enlargement to the east. All members but Romania and Bulgaria, who came a couple of years later. This enlargement has changed the nature of the European Union. It's no longer the same. It has changed the nature, first because a matter of size, and secondly, and more important, because it's a matter of different political cultures. 40 years or 50 years under the communism dictatorship shapes the mind of the people. And the new member states and the people who represented them at the European Parliament had clearly a different mindset. And more, it has been evident. And today, we face a kind of a political divorce between East and West, which is quite worrying. The dynamics of countries like Holland, Poland, or Hungary, which if they had to be members today, we wouldn't accept them. One thing is to throw them out, and another thing is to accept them. But it is clear that their values, their political understanding, they are not exactly the same, that which are considered the cornerstone of the European Union from a political point of view. Do I mean that it was a mistake to let them in all at the same time? Well, you never know. Contrafactual is quite difficult to do, no? Which would have been the difference? Could have been better? I don't know, but at that moment everybody believed that to keep them out until they were prepared was going to take long, because they have been waiting quite a lot of years and they were not prepared at all. Romania and Bulgaria stayed 2 years more out, and 2 years after they were not better prepared than 2 years before. So we decided to let them in, and maybe inside they will be better off than keeping them out, which would be the amount of instability that would have represented to have all these people out of the European Union, when for them the European Union was the door to, first of all, export their surplus of labor force and to be part of a political, let's say, I wouldn't say unity, but they have never wanted political union, but they understood that it was their horizon, their natural future. They would be very much frustrated if they had been kept out for many years. But in any case, it has changed the nature of the European Union. It's no longer the same. The old Carolingian nucleus around Germany, France, the Netherlands, Belgium, and Italy was something completely different if you add up the Baltic and the Transylvanian countries. No? They are different. And today this difference appears much more clear than it was in the year 2004. Then it was the logistic issue to enlarge an institution, to increase the number of buildings, translation boxes, staff, to incorporate people from many other nationalities. The complexity increased a lot, exponentially, because you have to just the problem of languages become a nightmare. And as you know, here in this institution, buildings is always a problem, so there, it was also for us. But it worked, logistic work. Political culture, from my understanding, it didn't work.
Thanks. And that also speaks to me, because I am also of a nationality of a country which is still a candidate, Albania. So we'll see what happens with that in the future.
I'm sorry for you. I'm sorry for you, but I think you will have to wait.
Yes. Second question that I wanted to do is the EP. I think that as all institutions changes through times, and this was one such change, but I wanted to focus more on the EP has gotten more powers since its inception. It's still, we feel it is still not there yet as a real parliament, but the question for you is, during your period, did the EP increase what it could do either formally or informally, or how it related with the other European institutions?
Yes, the European Parliament has been increasing its power. During my mandate, got much more powers, and with the Lisbon Treaty, still more. The problem is that the more powers the European Parliament has, and the more important it is, the less people vote for it. The degree of participation in the European Parliament elections decreases. At the same time, it is more important, but something wrong is happening. You know, why Europeans don't realize that this institution is every time more important, because every time they are less interested in electing their representatives. Why so? Which is the problem? Is it a communication problem? Yes, it's a communication problem, but I think it's The problem is of a deeper nature. I think the European Parliament is an institution that builds consensus. Its purpose is to build consensus. And consensus is not something sexy, no? To build consensus and make people agree, well, you don't make a headline with that, no? You don't make a good picture. You don't go to the screens of TV saying they got an agreement. No. And the agreements are very important, but they don't call the interest of the people. People look for a fight between government and opposition. And this fight produces some strong moments. The only moment in which the European Parliament, during my mandate, went to the headlines was when we killed Buttiglione. When the commissioner proposed by Berlusconi was refused by the Parliament, and Berlusconi had to withdraw his proposal. This was a moment in which we were in the news, in the TVs, because we were blood at the stage, no? And this called the attention of the people. Unhappily, this is the way it works. But to tell people that you got an agreement on the REACH directive in order to control the environmental problem of the chemicals, it's a tough work, but it doesn't call very much interest of the ordinary citizens. But how do we do? How do we manage to make people to participate in the elections to the European Parliament, being it is, as it is every time more important? I don't know. I don't have an answer.
Okay, well, you've raised a number of really interesting points there, which I hope we'll have time to pursue later on. But let's go straight to Alessandro now. Your questions.
Good afternoon to everybody. I would also like to thank the organizers. In your vast political experience, you have had multiple responsibilities in the fields of public finance, both at national and at EU level. In the 1990s, you were Minister for Public Works, Transport and Environment in Spain. So I would like to ask you which role has the EU budget played in the economic growth of your country following Spain's accession to the European Community?
We got the help from the European Union. That's why for Spanish, at the end of the 90s, Europe was seen as a kind of good fare, no? Someone who brings you a lot of money. Not only money, also international credibility, also a kind of insurance against political involution. Remember that we had a coup d'etat in '81. But from the point of view of economic growth, Spain got 1% of its GNP every year for almost 20 years. It makes a lot of money. And it helps us to invest in infrastructure, about 3% of the GNP every year, 1/3 of it being paid by the European Union. And that's why when tourists go to Spain, they say, oh, what wonderful infrastructures you have. No? And that's true, we have a better infrastructures even than Germany, from the point of view of highways, airports, no? And this has been possible thanks to the European Union membership. No? Today is not the case. No? This flow of money has stopped, not completely stopped, but it's not as much abundant like it was. And secondly, from Brussels, what is coming is requirements for a stronger discipline from the point of view of public expenditure. So Europe is no longer seen in Spain as a nice fare. This vision of Europe has vanished. ¿Cómo se dice suegra? Who knows in Spanish? Suegra.
Mother-in-law. Yeah.
Exactly. Europe is today seen much more like a mother-in-law, no? Which by definition are bad. No?
Not a mad aunt.
No, the vision is not positive at all, especially among young people.
Is that so?
Yeah. When I told my students at the university, when I had, because now I am too old, but last year, when I saying to my students, the best years of modern history of Spain since the Trafalgar Battle until now have been the years in the European Union. For me, that's evident. From 86 till now, it has been the best years of our unhappy modern history. But I see that my students don't accept that. What do you say? They have not been you say they have been the best, they have been the worst. Why so? Because they are young and they don't have in their mind from 86 till now. What they have in their mind, their vital experience, it's from 2010 until 2018. And this has been the years of the crisis when Europe became a mother-in-law. The good fare is no longer there, no?
Extremely interesting to hear that. Hannah, your questions.
Yes, so going back to some of the questions that Andy asked in the beginning, you didn't say it, but the word was in the room, democratic deficit. So although we have these institutions like the EP, there's this real or perceived, and they might be the same, democratic deficit. And you're in this excellent situation of having been both a member of a national parliament where this problem doesn't seem to exist, and a member of the EP. So given your experience in the different institutions, I just wondered, what do you think are the reasons that this deficit exists at the EU level?
You know, when you talk with a prime minister and you talk about democratic deficit, for example, when Felipe González was being told about democratic deficit in the European Union, he would not accept this idea. Say, why? What is the democratic deficit? I've been elected in Spain. I am a democratic representative of my country. And I am going to Brussels and I take decisions in a council with other people who represent also democratically their countries. So where is the democratic deficit? Well, there is a democratic deficit because adding up democratic legitimities at home doesn't make a democratic legitimacy at the European level. Each one of you are a democratic representative elected of your countries for sure, but all together you don't build a democratic legitimacy at the European level. People don't feel that this. People don't have the idea that there is a democratic this accountability of the decision taken at the European level. The problem is that who decides what and in front of whom is he accountable. There is a problem, for sure, accountability. People have the feeling that they have lost control at home and they don't know exactly where this control has gone. You send competencies up, but where they are, who takes this decision, in front of whom? And people have in mind the Montesquieu scheme. We took 500 years to learn it, but now we have this in mind, no? There is a judiciary, there is an executive, there is a parliament, and everybody understands that at home. But how do you translate that to the European stage? It's not exactly the same thing. The Commission is at the same time partly executive, partly legislative, partly judiciary. The European Parliament has not all the powers of a national parliament. The Council at the end takes the lead, and inside the Council, who takes the lead is the more powerful countries. And more people don't see exactly which are the way to demand accountability to the decision-making bodies. No? And this is a big problem for Europe. And as far as the matters were technical matters, well, it was a kind of ¿cómo se llama? Permissive consensus, no? Yeah. Let's do. But now the matters that we are dealing with are at the core of the problems affecting citizens. And when you are in Spain and you see that the commissioner says you have to decrease your retirement rights, you have to increase your taxes, you have to reduce your subsidies of the social welfare, You say, well, who are you? Who are you in order to decide about my retirement system? From where comes your authority? Who elected you to do that? No? And when you listen to a commissioner, German commissioner say the markets will learn to the Italian people how they have to vote, when it's still much worse, no? And this kind of attitudes are very damaging of the European perception of the citizen. So it is a democratic deficit. And the only way of fighting it is, from my understanding, but I know it's controversial, it's politicization of the European Union. We have to politicize the European Union. We cannot continue saying, no, the Commission is a kind of technical body who takes care of the treaties, and it doesn't matter which is the ideology of the commissioners, because at the end they are a kind of technocratic body, no? And there is no government, there is no opposition. It doesn't work anymore. If we want to build a political union, we have to put some political structures. And the first one is a debate between different purposes, different alternatives, in order for people to understand which are the choices. No? Because today, when they go to vote in the European Parliament, for what they vote? At the end, they vote according with national parameters. They repeat more or less the same vote that they do on national issues, because there are no clear issues on the European stage.
Okay, let's move to Maria.
Yes, so thank you very much. And I would like to come back to an issue that we have touched superficially on. Because while you were president of the European Parliament, it was during a period of EU integration, more member states coming in, maybe more euphoria for the European project. Whereas 10 years after you've left office, essentially we find very strong Eurosceptic forces, both in the newer member states, like Poland, Hungary, but also in the old, very old member states like Italy. So my question is, do you think the European Union can deal with this situation? Does it have antibodies against the illness of Euroscepticism?
The problem today is not Euroscepticism, it's Europhobia. It's different. No? Euroscepticism has always been. No? From a certain point, I am also Eurosceptic. Some things I don't believe in. But one thing is to be more or less critical, and another thing is to be clearly against it by irrational attitudes. No? I am against, I am Europhobic. Euro is a danger, Euro is the bad. We have to fight against it. And there are two different attitudes in front of it. The original ones, people who has always been against Europe, Mr. Farage, it's a prototype. No? I don't want this. I fight it. I go to the European Parliament to prevent Europe from being built. And the second one, these are the dangerous one, is the one who has become Europhobic or strongly Eurosceptical. It's a border between being strongly Eurosceptical and being Europhobic, due to the fact that Europe has not delivered. And Italy is a good example of that. Europe has not delivered. In the last 10 years, sorry, but the euro has not fulfilled its promises. The euro has not brought a shared and sustainable prosperity to everybody. Euro has meant years of euphoria until 2008, 2009, when everything was going well. And then it has come already 10 years of crisis. When a crisis lasts for 10 years, it's not a crisis. It's a chronic situation. And Italy is a good example of how the euro as a whole hasn't worked. I don't say that the problems of Italy are consequences of the euro. Not all. I'm not saying that leaving the euro would be a solution for the Italian problems at all. But the feeling of the people is that on the last 10 years, being part of the European Union has not helped for a shared and sustainable prosperity. For Italy, who has a trade account surplus, quite big, 3%, it's doing quite well. 3% of trade surplus is a lot. Which would be the interest of leaving the euro? You leave the euro in order to be able to manipulate the exchange rate. But if you have in surplus, why do you want to manipulate the exchange rate? It's completely useless. By the contrary, you go out to the euro, the interest rate will be skyrocketing, and with the high debt you have, you will be ruined. So the idea of leaving the euro for a professional economist in Italy doesn't make much sense. It wouldn't make much sense if you were in trade deficit, no? As a deficit, and you adjust in order to balance it. But for Italy to leave the euro, I don't think it's the solution. The fact is, living inside the euro requires some disciplines that affect negatively economic growth. And this has to be discussed, because you cannot go backwards, but you cannot stay in the status quo. So the idea of the people is that Europe has not helped in front of migration problem, for example. Italians feel, and they are right, they have let alone in front of the migration problems. And that the therapies that have been implemented to face the crisis has not fulfilled good results. Spain is doing much better than Italy. But Spain is not fulfilling the budget discipline of the European Union. We have a deficit of 4%, 4.5%. Italy has been fulfilling the discipline. They are on 3%. But which is the reward? No? Virtue is not rewarding, the Italians say, and that's right. So I think this is the problem. People who were strongly, deeply pro-Europeans, and now they are not, because on the last year, European Union has not delivered good results.
Very good. Before we move on to this second round of questioning, there's a question I would like to put to you, and it comes back to your time as President of the European Parliament. Now, while you were President, there were referendums in France and the Netherlands on the EU proposed constitutional treaty in 2005, and those referendums ended up being no votes. From your position in Strasbourg and Brussels, were those felt as very serious setbacks, or was it a case of, no, we just move on anyway?
Well, we didn't move on anyway. We didn't move on anyway, we stopped. Right. We stopped. We didn't continue asking European people what they think about the...
No, but the Lisbon Treaty was a kind of...
well, this was the way we solved problems in Europe, no? We changed the envelope and we tried to keep the substance, no? But we didn't continue asking people, would you like to vote for this constitution? Look, the Spanish were the first one to vote, and we voted enthusiastically. Yes, yes, yes. But immediately after, the French say no, and the Dutch say no, and the whole process stopped. Had the French said yes, I'm sure the British would have said no. One or another would have said no. And that's why today nobody wants to go to a new treaty review.
Right.
Nobody wants, because they say, well, this is a la roulette russe, no? You are playing.
Someone would vote no.
Exactly. Out of 27, someone will say no, so we better don't try. But the idea that people didn't like it was answered in a very pragmatic way, saying which are the issues which are considered damaging. The symbolic ones, out. European flag. The European flag doesn't exist. There is nowhere something who says that the European flag is the flag that we use. It's an apocrypha. It's a flag that the European anthem, nowhere. Nowhere is said. It was said in the European Constitution. It was taken out. The Minister of Foreign Affairs was reduced to High Representative. Every symbolic thing was taken out. The important things remain, but they didn't vote, was not called to vote for it. The French people didn't vote again. And from a democratic point of view, you can argue that it was a kind of going behind the door, no? In order to make an approval of things that substantially were more or less the same. No? Yeah. This was for me a breaking point between the European elite and ordinary people.
The experience in 2005, yes.
Because the European elite, and I was part of it, because I was a member of the convention, we thought that calling constitution, we were going to raise the enthusiasm of the people, saying, oh yes, European constitution, we are going to build a political union, and people will be supporting it. Because this was our mindset. In fact, it was not the case. Yeah. People were not enthusiastic, were surprised, reluctant, and from the left, from the, let's say, ordinary left in France, Mr. Fabius and part of the Socialist Party were against it. It was used as an internal politics tool. And the turning point went when some people asked the French government, I want to read the Constitution. At that time, it was not internet. You could not go to Google and put European Constitution and have the text there, no? Yeah. And people say, do you want me to approve the Constitution? I want to read it. How can I read it? And then the French government printed several tens of millions of this thick book like this and sent by post to the people. Yeah. And then put you in the shoes of a farmer in Languedoc who receives a book like this, completely ununderstandable, no? With 400 articles, and to have to vote it, because it is the European Constitution. Yeah. And then the ANDI told them, do you understand it? No, then don't vote it. And this was the end. It was a divorce between the elites who were much in the front and people were lagging behind.
That's very, very interesting recollections there. Let's move on. Alessandro.
I'm back to the EU budget. Following your election as President of the European Parliament, you highlighted the negotiations with the Council on the 2007-2013 financial perspectives as one of the priorities for your mandate. In your experience, how difficult was it to negotiate and to reform the EU budget in a union with 25 members that would soon become 27? And what were the main outcomes of those negotiations?
This was a bad experience. I remember very well the financial perspective. The problem is not 27 or 28. The problem is unanimity. When you have to take decisions about financial matters through unanimity, and each one of the member states look at the problem through their glasses, through the color of their glasses, and everybody's having a back of the envelope accounting, saying how much do I pay, how much do I got? And everybody's taking not a pan-European approach, but a national approach. And at the end, you have to get the agreement of everybody. Well, the only possible agreement is a weak agreement, not an ambitious agreement, because if someone has to win, someone has to lose. And if nobody wants to lose, then nobody will win. Then there's a kind of stalemate. I remember President Barroso saying at the Parliament, these financial perspectives are unacceptable. And I was at the presidency and I told him, if they are unacceptable, don't accept them. Don't accept them. We can perfectly not accept them. The Parliament and the Commission together say no. But at the end, we accepted them. Because where is the power, the real power? In the Council. If the Council doesn't agree, you can say whatever you want, but it is not going to be an agreement. So the financial perspective were a weak agreement. The new financial perspectives are still a weak agreement. Everybody says that the European budget should be bigger, but in the practical terms, as far as there is unanimity rule to decide, it will never grow, because it has to grow, but everybody has to win. This is impossible. So either we renounce to unanimity, or we are not going to have a bigger EU budget. That's why everybody's, not everybody, some people are talking today, we were talking with Miguel Maduro about the Euro budget. If you cannot increase the EU budget, let's create another budget, a budget for the Eurozone, with a different purpose, with the purpose of facing another external shock, no? Having the capacity of intervening on the economic cycle of a country being affected by some particular situation. We could do that also from the EU budget by putting a special line for conjunctural purposes. But unanimity is something that we should get rid of it. The problem is that to get rid of unanimity, it requires unanimity. Because you don't get out of unanimity, you are unanimously agreeing on it, and it's not going to happen. So.
Maria?
Yes, I will go with the question of one of the buzzwords that already fell, Catalonia. So essentially you're Catalan, but you're also very much a European. You've presided over European institutions. And you have been really outspoken about the issue of Catalonia. So I was wondering whether you could give your views on the situation, both from your perspective as Catalan and as European, and maybe whether you could see a scenario how different levels of governance, so the regional, the national, the European, could interact and help to solve this situation.
You mean a kind of European intervention?
I'm asking you.
Frankly speaking, I don't see the possibility, nor the effectivity. No, this is
desirability.
No, not even. Frankly speaking, not even. That's why the pro-independency people will like to. If you read the book of the new Catalan president, I've been reading it because I have to know which is the thinking of the people. He says clearly, we have to go, Catalonia has to pass through a Kosovo experience. We have to face the Spanish government to produce a Kosovo situation in which the situation will be so bad we have to succeed on the Spanish government sending the tanks, sending a kind of a tough military reaction against us. Because when we have another Kosovo, then the international community will be obliged to intervene. But my God, to compare Catalonia with Kosovo is something quite ridiculous, no? So, I don't know if the young people among you remember what happened in Kosovo, how was Kosovo, no? But you can hardly say that the situation in Catalonia is or can be like Kosovo, no? So we are very far away of that, thanks God. And I don't think an international mediation could help. I don't see the way out neither, no? Because it's a problem rooted on a big divide of the country, no? 47% in one side, 47% in the other side, and 6-7% in the middle. No?
And yet individual EU governments did speak up for the unity of Spain.
Yes, they did.
So do you think that had any impact on the situation in Catalonia?
No, because the people who are in favor of independence, they know that the governments will not help them. What they want to mobilize is the public opinion. They want to mobilize the press, intellectuals, the parties,
Right.
and on that they have been quite successful. The public opinion, until now at least, it's much more sympathetic of the independency people than the country. While the governments, no, the governments understand very well which is at the stake, you know, and any European government will intervene or will react. But the public opinion is a different thing. In Europe and in the United States, the public opinion is much more on the side of the poor people who are in jail, poor people who are prevented from voting. Comment se dice, récit en français, this vision, no? It's much more appealing than the appealing of you have to fulfill with the law, right. And if you don't fulfill with the law, you will go to jail.
Yeah, yeah. Andy.
Thank you. So we talked about, so I want to ask another question about the European Parliament. In the European Parliament, we have the two main parties and several other parties, but my question would be...
Until now.
Until now, yes. The question would be this. Are there any alliances? Because, for example, the issues that France, Spain, or Italy face with regards, for example, to the euro are similar, and there are other issues that northern countries face. Are there any, let's say, possible transnational alliances or national in the sense Southern Europe against Northern Europe or Eastern Europe that do they manifest in any possible way in the European Parliament, or are only in the way the governments act? This is more a question of how the dynamics within the European parliaments are.
I don't know how does it work now. I left the European Parliament in 2009. It's 10 years ago. And in 10 years, things has changed a lot. And I am afraid it will change still more after new elections. When I was there, and in my understanding, the European Parliament works on two bases, the national basis and the ideological basis, the party basis. Theoretically, it is organized on the basis of political parties. You are socialist, you are popular, you are liberal, and inside each group there are people from different countries. And I suppose that the socialists vote as socialists, not as Germans or French or Spanish. It's supposed, because when the time comes, the national dimension appears to be very important. For example, when we vote the budget or the financial perspective of things that matters, then inside each political group, there are strong divisions among countries. And it's very difficult to imagine that the socialist Germans or the popular conservative Germans will be voting against the national interest of Germany. At that moment, the national dimension prevails over the ideological issue. But this fight exists, this double dimension. Who are you? You are a socialist or you are Spanish? Or you are a Spanish socialist. Yes, but what does it mean at the end? No? And in the critical moments when you talk something which it is easily perceived as a cross point between national interest and ideological position, then what happens? Everybody votes whatever they think they have to vote. About migration, it's more or less the same thing. In migration, the political groups are not following an ideological position. They are following the position of their countries.
Sounds like the Socialist International in August 1914.
Well, or even now, the Socialist International. Even now. No, that's a pity, but I have to tell you the truth. No? I could say, no, the socialists have the... And it depends also, you know, on the electoral system in each country. The way the members of the parliament are being elected and the control that the government has on them. It's very different. If you are being elected in a global list, when you are part of the list because the party put you there, then you have to follow the discipline of the party. And if or the national interest. If you are being elected, like in the United Kingdom, on personal constituencies, then the freedom of the member of the parliament is much bigger.
Yes.
And he can react more freely because he's facing his constituency. I was elected in a list. The control on my vote is much bigger than if I were elected on a personal basis facing my own constituency.
Very good.
This is, I've seen, it's clearly determinant of the capacity of the member of the parliament to vote by according with their understanding.
Extremely interesting point. Hannah?
So you mentioned you were a professor. So you've come into contact with the famous millennial generation. Now we know that they have lower party identification, that their turnout in elections is lower, much lower than previous generations. Yet when they do vote, as we saw in Brexit, they tend to support the European Union. So given that the future of Europe potentially lies in the hands of this generation, I was wondering whether you have any particular request or any message you would like to send, especially also because they're likely to be our audience.
Yeah. Europe has been built by the post-war generation. Europe was being built by people like Hans-Gert Pöttering, my successor at the European Parliament, who came here. His father was killed in the last days of the war, and he has been marked by this experience. Europe is a project built on looking for peace, and the people who were looking for peace were the people who remember the war. And it has been working until now. But the memory of war has vanished. When I talk to my students, they say, Europe is peace. They say, of course. And what else? Peace is a state of the nature, no? Peace, what else? Can you imagine the war? Can you imagine that you are going to be sent to a tranchee to kill your friend, the Erasmus friend of last summer? No, it's out of your mindset. Nobody reacts positively in front of Europe because Europe is peace. Because war has disappeared from our capacity of imagining the future, which is a good thing. My God, with our past record, with our past history, this is an extraordinary advance, the fact that we cannot even imagine war among us. But it's clear that it's not enough. This generation, my generation, is dying. Well, I hope to stay some years more, but my generation is dying. People who remember the war is dying. And the young people have to find another reason to support European integration. Another reason, and the reason is a kind of openness to the world, cosmopolitanism, no? As a mix of nomadism, people traveling a lot, learning languages, having several experiences, coming to Florence to study, to travel. And for these people, Europe is good because there is no borders, there is a single currency, you don't have to exchange money, nobody asks you what do you have in your luggage, show me your passport. This is good. Europe is an open door to the world. So the millennials like Europe because Europe is free. There's the freedom of travel, freedom of movement, going everywhere, having the capacity of working to Sweden, a Spanish guy to work or to study. This is good for them. But what is not good for them is this lack of political accountability we were talking at the beginning. Europe is a space of free movement, and I move, so I am happy. If I were a retired people living in the field and not moving and not traveling, these advantages would be less important for me. I don't care if there is a border or not. In any case, I'm not moving. And these people are not very much in favor of Europe because they are afraid that movement means that other people move to my neighborhood. Not me moving, it's other people coming to bother me and maybe they are dangerous. No? They make a mix between migrants, free movement of people, terrorism, Islam. It's like in the collective imagination, all this produces a mix which is not positive. But the millennials don't share that. The millennials want to move. They want to have the opportunity of going abroad, work, study, have friends, to share opportunities. But they lack the feeling of belonging. They don't have the feeling of belonging to a political system. Their political reference remains national. I don't think people voting populist movement, most of the young people vote for populist movement from right to left. I don't think they think politically in European terms. Vitally, yes. Politically, I don't think so.
That's very interesting. I think we've just got, with Miguel's approval, we have got time for a handful of questions, just a few minutes, I think, really. So if anyone wants to ask a question, raise your hand, identify yourself, and please keep the question short. Anyone? Okay. Over here on the left.
My name is William. Okay, thank you. My name is William Lochi. I'm from South Sudan. South Sudan. I'm affiliated with the School of Transnational Governance at the European University Institute here. My questions relate to your tenure as the chair of the Committee of Development on Development from 2007. And your mandate, as it says, you're more or less dealing with negotiating with issues of aid on the developing countries in terms of development and all that. There's a lot of critics, particularly in Africa, with regard to a lot of conditionalities from the aid coming from the European Union, just generally saying from the Western world. And as a result of that, there is a shift to the East, where there is a lot of Chinese coming now, doing a lot of infrastructures and all that. So my question would be that, what is your comments on that? What would be your take on that? And as a result of that, because a lot of people who really don't care about human rights, about development, about all this, they will just say, we're not going to go with these conditionalities, but we'd rather prefer development, and that's why they opted to go to China.
Wow. You're right. You are right. I've been, as chairman of the Development Committee, I've been traveling through most countries of Africa and Latin America, and especially in Africa, the request was, you Europeans, you are so boring. I have to fill in so many forms. I have to give so many explanations. You are so slow on giving the answer that at the end, it doesn't work. The Chinese don't ask me anything, and they react immediately. I need a road, and tomorrow appears here 1,000 Chinese workers, and they build the road. And 3 years later, we're still filling in forms and reports and requests and audits, and the road is not done. That's true. What should we do? To stop forgetting, to stop requiring about human rights, the political rules? I don't think. Maybe we should be more effective, more proactive, no? Because there are two things. First, the requirements, and second, the implementation. We should continue requiring conditionalities, but we should maybe give a quick answer to prove to be more effective. In any case, my experience from the European aid is that it is a kind of homeopathic activity. Small doses everywhere about almost everything. We do everything everywhere in such small doses that changes nothing. Structurally doesn't change anything. With some big project, like for example Darfur, no? In Darfur, yes, we are spending an incredible amount of money to help to protect people in Darfur, many of the things we do, one day, remember, I was in a small village, it was in Nigeria, opening a school, European flag. And I asked some people there, who is these people? Who is this flag? And they told me, it is an ONG. It is an ONG. In some respects. That's the vision. It's an ONG, and they have plenty of money. And they come here and they do something, they do a school, they do a well, they do something, but doesn't change structurally almost anything.
That's an interesting story. Any other questions? I thought I saw a... I see a hand over here.
Yes? Okay. So I'm Ioannis Galariotis from the School of Transnational Governance. My question is related to what Hannah actually asked. And I would like to extend her question not only to the new generation, but I mean to everyone, to the whole EU society. So you mentioned that typically people from the EU member states vote in the European Parliament elections based on their experience in the national level. And what I would like to ask is, in what ways we can actually close this gap between the EU level and the national level in order for the citizens to feel closer to the EU and really, in reality, deeply vote for the EU problems and more general aspects.
In other words, how can we Europeanize, no? Europeanize the political debate, no? How can we make people to participate in the European elections according with the European prospects, issues, or alternatives, no? Well, in Spain, it was, until now, it was quite difficult because the two big parties agreed on the European project. There was no difference. With the crisis, the difference has come. Because in the crisis, and due to the answer to the crisis, it has been a split, a difference among how to do. And I hope that in the next European elections, it will be very much present. But until now, it was a big consensus. There were not such big difference among one and the others. The difference started in the last election when some people were in favor of austerity policies and others against it. The problem is that the social democracy who were theoretically against it in practical terms have been practicing also austerity policies when they have been in government. So they were not very much qualified in order to criticize it because they have been following it also, which is the case of Spain and the socialist government with Mr. Zapatero. So in practical terms, there's still no difference. Let's see if in the future, thanks to the questions that crisis has put on the table and the different political answers, it would be some choices for the citizens. Because until now, what does make the difference at the European level? Since I don't see the difference at the European level, I vote according with the difference I see at national level.
Of course, in some respects, the launch of the euro and the era of the eurozone has become an era in which one country's domestic affairs, particularly its economic performance, fiscal position, is of concern to citizens in another country. I mean, this is so. That has been the sort of thing that has generated controversy and generated criticism.
A European debate.
Yeah, there is a kind of European debate actually. Yeah. The thing that has been surprising, but wasn't anticipated, is that it's turned into a debate between a kind of large, very pro-EU, pro-Euro moderate group, and then the kind of unconventional outsiders.
Yes, for the first time, what happens in Greece is a matter of concern for Germans. No? Until now, Greece was a question apart, no? But now it's a matter of concern for everybody. No? From the bad side, we are concerned because they can put troubles on us, no? Not because we are very much worried about their well-being, no? Because it's a toxic problem, a toxic situation that can affect us. But in any case, it has created a pan-European debate, and what's happening in one country concerns to others. No? If the unemployment were something that we had to face all together, like in the States, where the unemployment benefits are federal, and the Germans should pay for the unemployment in Greece, and they would be much more interested in it. No? But we still lack this link. No? We are worried about, we are concerned, but there is not a fiscal structure that puts the problem at a collective level. No? Oh, there is a big unemployment in Italy or in Greece. That's their problem. The jump, some people are requiring that. It's let's share the big risk. Unemployment, current accounts guarantees, and public debts, big risk. We have to share them. And in this case, we will be very much concerned with happening in our neighbor's home. But I understand perfectly that other countries doesn't want to share these risks. And today the debate in Europe can be resumed saying, some people say, in order to reduce the risk, we have to share them. And others say they are too big to be shared. In order to share, first you have to reduce it. Right. First you reduce, then we share. And others say, in order to reduce, we have to share, because they are too big that we cannot reduce without sharing. And this is the dialectical approach between, let's say, for example, Germany, who says the risk is too big, I don't want to share them, reduce them, and then it will share. And the French and the Mediterranean countries who say the risks are too big that we cannot reduce them without sharing, which is the balance point between these two approaches. This should be one of the big debates in the next European elections.
That's neatly summed up. Should I pass over to Miguel now?
Okay, so just to add a couple of questions, but I think we've had enough already, and I'll have my opportunity to put it to you later on. So thank you very much. Really just to thank Josep Borrell again so much. It was really, really interesting, I think, in many respects. Tony also for having moderated this discussion, and of course the four of you for the questions, and you all for having participated. Thank you very much to everybody. Thank you.
Thank you. Oof, can I have a drink?